Good evening and a very warm welcome to News Tonight on Sabha TV. I'm Tina Jha. Like always, let's begin with the top stories. On day one of the G20 summit in Australia, Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls for insulating reforms from political pressures, pushes for coordinated approach against black money and terror. Chhattisgarh's sterilization horror unravels further. Investigators find rat poison traces in antibiotics administered after sterilization surgeries. Modified direct benefit transfer scheme for LPG launched in 54 districts across 11 states. And BSF intelligence report saying Chinese troops are training Pakistani army personnel right across the Indo-Pak border in Jammu and Kashmir raises concern in India. Our top story this evening. Insulate reforms from the political pressures. That was at the centre of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's pitch for widespread economic reforms as he met leaders of developing and developed economies at the G20 summit in Brisbane. The two-day summit of leaders from developed and developing nations got underway today. Here's a report.
Global leaders representing two-thirds of the world's population under a single roof. The group of 20 countries controls 75% of global trade, a reflection of the importance of this meeting's bigger objective to raise global GDP. Closed session proceedings of the summit were held on Saturday.
As you look around the world, there are many difficulties and problems. There are problems in the Middle East, there are problems in Eastern Europe, there are terrible problems in West Africa. Growth has been fragile, but the message that should come from us over these next 2 days is a message of hope and optimism.
Prime Minister Modi received a special welcome, a reflection also of India's rising importance in the global economy. He held bilateral talks with heads of Canada and France. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott also hosted a retreat for leaders ahead of the summit. As Prime Minister Modi seeks to accelerate his economic reforms drive, he spoke of keeping the reforms process apart from political pressures. He stressed on reforms being simplified, people-centric and people-driven, besides the need for nations to collaborate against terrorism.
This was a personal vision that he outlined based on his own experience of how reform works and his thinking of how he is going to take the reform process forward in India.
The Prime Minister also raised the issue of climate change, urging member nations to take strong corrective action. US President Barack Obama announced $3 billion for the Green Climate Fund to help developing nations cope with the effects of global warming. He also pointed strong fingers at China on the menace.
We are also encouraging China to adhere to the same rules as other nations, whether in trade or on the seas. And in this engagement, we will continue to be frank about where there are differences.
The open session of the G20 summit is to be held on Friday with open talks and speeches by attending leaders. The world watches closely for key takeaways. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
In Brisbane today, Prime Minister Narendra Modi made some really strong statements on economic reforms, on how to deal with global terror and also how to bring back the black money stashed abroad. How much of an impact was the Prime Minister able to make in Brisbane among the global leaders? To discuss that, we have with us on News Tonight Mr. Rajiv Dogra, former diplomat. A very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha TV, Mr. Dogra. We heard Prime Minister Narendra Modi making some really strong statements today, particularly on how to simplify processes as far as economic reforms is concerned. Now, at a time when the G20 nations are aiming at an increase in its combined growth rate, how significant is Narendra Modi's statement?
Well, I think it is significant in the sense that this was made before the summit actually started, at what is called the retreat, and it was made at the request of the Australian Prime Minister, who wanted Prime Minister Modi to outline his vision to the other G20 leaders about what reforms actually are and what they should be. And I think Prime Minister, by focusing on people, has made two very, very interesting and nuanced points. By people, he does not just mean that it should be voted by the people, but by the fact that it should be a democratic system. It should be the one which involves all the stakeholders.
Right.
At an international level, that stakeholders means all the nations, which is not happening today, because IMF, World Bank and all the rest of the financial structures date back to the World War II. Second, at the national levels, not just in India but other countries also, there is a need that there should be more involvement, more democratization of the reform process. So I think that was a point very validly made.
Right, Mr. Dokra, like the Prime Minister says that, it's true that reforms are seen as government programs and the people see it as a burden. So by simplifying this process, don't you think the Prime Minister is talking about a very lengthy process?
No, all new processes take time. After all, look at the reforms which were agreed to in 2008 when the first heads of governments meeting of G20 level started. Before that, it was at the finance ministers level. So from 2008, there have been promises of reforms, for example, of IMF, but they have not been carried through. So when there is a crisis, and the elevation of G20 to heads of government level, prime ministers and presidents, was in response to the acute financial crisis. When there is a crisis, people tend to act, and G20 tends to act also. But let us not minimize the impact of the desire for reforms, of the desire for a new direction, because what we are talking of is a board of directors of the world who get together, okay, only once in a year, but they get together and they get familiar with each other. There can be differences, there can be friction, as has happened with China, as is happening now with Russia, but there are also similarities and there are also friendships which are cemented, as is happening between Mr. Modi, Cameroon, Abbott and many others. For example, the Japanese Prime Minister has hosted a special dinner for him yesterday. Right. So these are things how bonds develop.
Mr. Dogra, another important thing that Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke about was how to deal with global terror. He speaks about adopting a common strategy which all states must adopt. In the current scenario, owing to the differences worldwide, how effective is this statement going to be?
Well, I think now we are treading on a very sensitive path, because so far G20 was concentrated on financial issues. But of late, it is now veered on to political issues. Even before the summit started, there was a move to ease Russia out of the G20 membership, which BRICS resisted. Then both Australia and Canada, and now England also, have been very rough in their treatment of Russia. So as a result, President Putin has decided to leave the summit even before it ends officially. He'll be leaving tomorrow morning. So coming back to your question about tackling terror, how can you tackle terror when an important member of the group and a country like Russia is left out in the cold?
Certainly.
So terror is a huge issue. Terror is one which would affect the Western countries the most, especially if ISIS becomes the phenomena and the terror that it is suspected to become.
Right.
But we cannot tackle terror when some of the important players in the world are made into a pariah state. So Russia and to some extent China are not on the same level, not on the same pitch as the rest of the Western world is on the issue of terror. So I see difficulties ahead on this. I see differences ahead on this, because Saudi Arabian viewpoint, Saudi Arabia is also a member.
Right.
So is Turkey. Both Saudi Arabia and Turkey see the view differently.
Mr.
They
Dogra,
view it vastly
do
differently
stay with
than
us. We'll
America
come
does.
back and discuss with you what Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke on bringing back the black money stashed abroad. Now, ahead of the G20 summit meet, Prime Minister Modi pushed his government's domestic agenda on black money at an informal meeting of leaders of the BRICS countries. The issue found an echo among Indians in Australia as well as in politics back home.
A smaller, informal gathering ahead of the bigger 20-nation summit. Leaders of the five-nation BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, that account for half the world population and one-fifth of global economic output, looking to coordinate positions among developing nations. Prime Minister Modi gave India's black money concern a push. Repatriation of black money kept abroad is a key priority for us, he said, adding that unaccounted money abroad is also linked to security challenges.
These measures send a strong message to the rest of the world about the efficacy of BRICS. Besides this, we have started work on many other proposals that would deepen our relations and enhance our cooperation in all spheres.
The black money issue has found considerable echo among the Indian diaspora in Australia, many of whom see bringing it back to India as a critical crusade of the Modi government.
And we would like to see that money go back to India, and I think he's doing his best. He's raised it in the right platform. I'm very sure something positive will come out of this, and we'll see the black money going back to India.
Modi has raised this issue, and he has also convinced the people. I mean, the people there. Today morning, the BRIC leaders of the BRIC and also of the G20, they've accepted. And this is where the black money, so-called black money of Indian lies. I mean, these are the 20 countries where most of the money is there.
Back home, the Prime Minister's remarks on black money raised political rumblings, the BJP calling it a determined and dedicated push on the matter, the opposition claiming that there's nothing to show for it on the ground.
Much before the election, Prime Minister has promised to bring back the entire black money which is stashed from India and deposited in unknown accounts in foreign banks within a period of 100 days and 150 days. Now that time is almost over. Now what is the modus operandi which he is to adopt, or how it is going to be brought back? They have not done a thing so far.
ब्लैक मनी को लेके आज जिस प्रकार से प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने ऑस्ट्रेलिया में इस मामले को उठाया है, ये बहुत सराहनीय है.
The meeting of BRICS leaders was also an opportunity to take stock of issues like formation of a new development bank and contingent reserve arrangement discussed at their meet in July. In the bigger picture, both BRICS and G20 have a big role to play. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
All right, Mr. Dogra, coming back to you on the black money issue. At several platforms, Prime Minister Modi has said again and again that bringing back black money is his top priority. Today, he discussed the issue with the BRICS nation leaders at an informal meeting, and now is expected to obviously raise this issue with the other world leaders as well. Now, how much global coordination do you think he can expect at the G20 summit on the black money issue?
Well, I wouldn't like to speculate on the political aspect of it, which you've had reactions already. But let me sort of inform your viewers on the practical difficulties. You've just had an instance, or couple of instances, where even Supreme Court found it difficult to come out with the entire list because of certain bilateral obligations. Yeah. So obviously there are roadblocks in having the entire picture about black money. Otherwise, Prime Minister Modi would not have made such a strong pitch. So what he is saying is that there should be transparency. If Mr. X from India has got some money in a Swiss account or in a Luxembourg account, then the government of India has the right to know how he got it there and how much has he got. So that kind of transparency is not available, and I think it is going to be a difficult and a slightly tedious process before the world accepts the logic of it. Yes. The second thing is that the president of EU, the current president of EU, was the Prime Minister of Luxembourg, where quite a few people from around the world stashed their black money. And the third aspect of it, the black money is just not money which someone has kept in a bank or in a secret Swiss account. But beyond that, black money also refers to illegal money from either drug trafficking or counterfeiting, like Dawood Ibrahim is doing. That is also a form of black money. So the issue is much larger than the simple rubrics.
Right, Mr. Dogra. And on this domestic agenda that the Prime Minister has been pitching for, how much of a breakthrough will he be able to make? How much global coordination he's able to gather? That remains to be seen. Many thanks for joining us on News Tonight. We'll take a very short break here. Now, still to come, government announces a sharp rise in government buying centres for cotton farmers. That and other national and world news on the other side. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching News Tonight. More shocking revelations from Chhattisgarh days after the mass sterilization horror killed 14 women. Health officials say contaminated medicines were used at the government-run sterilization camp. Traces of a chemical compound used to kill rats have been found in antibiotics given to the women after surgery. Here's a report.
Medicines contaminated with rat poison. Can blatant nonchalance and negligence get worse than this? The team investigating the tragedy found the antibiotic pills given to women after sterilization surgery contained traces of zinc phosphide, a component of rat poison. Quantities of zinc phosphide were also found at a pharmaceutical factory which supplied medicines to these health camps. More in a barrage of blame for the state government.
उसको क्या है जेल वेल की वगैरह कानून की सजा ना दें उसको जनता की अदालत में खड़ा करिए जनता ही उसको सजा देगा.
The opposition has stepped up its attack on Chief Minister Raman Singh. Congress Vice President Rahul Gandhi was in Bilaspur today to meet families of the victims. He alleged that there was a huge nexus of fake medicines of which the state government was a part.
ये जो कैंप यहाँ चलाए गए सही तरीके से नहीं चलाए गए और बहुत सारे लोगों को नुकसान पहुंचा. सरकार अपनी जिम्मेदारी को एक्सेप्ट नहीं कर रही है और उल्टा दवाइयों को जलाया जा रहा है और इस बात को दबाने की कोशिश की जा रही है.
The government-run sterilization camp, which went horribly wrong in Bilaspur last week, has so far claimed 14 lives and close to 50 women are still battling for life. 4 top health officials of the district, including the doctor who conducted the surgeries, have been arrested. A judicial probe is also underway. Bureau Report, Rajya TV.
Well, the scale of the negligence coming out from Chhattisgarh just doesn't seem to end. Moving on now, in relief to cotton farmers in Maharashtra and Telangana, Union Textiles Minister Santosh Kumar Gangwar has announced a rise in the number of government cotton buying centres in both these states. There will now be 118 centres against the existing 70. Farmers can directly sell their produce at these centres at the minimum support price fixed by the government. The move comes on the back of expectations of a sharp rise in cotton production this year. The government is also expecting an output of 4 lakh tons this time. In the absence of a government purchase centre, farmers depend on private traders who buy cotton at a cheaper price and do not make payments on time. This kind of situation has forced more than 350 farmers to commit suicide in Telangana and Maharashtra in just the last 2 months.
2008-9 के बाद अब इस वर्ष ये समस्या सामने नजर आ रही है. उत्पादन ज़्यादा होने के कारण और चीन ने अपनी नीति में बदलाव करने के कारण कुछ समस्या हम लोगों के सामने आ रही है.
And it was a large dose of emotion and nostalgia for Indian-American South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley today when she paid obeisance at the Golden Temple in Amritsar. Haley is on an 18-day visit to Punjab with a business delegation. However, she termed today's visit as personal and emotional. She also visited the adjoining Jallianwala Bagh and paid tributes to the martyrs. Haley's parents had immigrated from Punjab to the United States in the 1960s. She was elected governor of South Carolina State in 2010. In the last few days, Haley has met the state chief minister and assured efforts to promote U.S. investment in Punjab.
We are here to certainly recruit companies that want to do business in the United States. We want them to do businesses in South Carolina. We think that there's a lot of industry here in India that we would like to see in South Carolina, but we certainly want to see a lot of our South Carolina companies invest in India as well.
In some political news now, ahead of the assembly polls in Delhi, Aam Aadmi Party chief Arvind Kejriwal on Saturday launched his party's Delhi Dialogue campaign, promising 8 lakh jobs for the youth of the capital. Addressing a gathering at Jantar Mantar in Delhi, the former Delhi Chief Minister made promises on setting up of colleges, education, student loans and creating jobs in the capital. Alleging apathy towards the youth by political parties, Kejriwal claimed that many youths are still unemployed despite several posts lying vacant in the government.
हम लोग यूथ के लिए इकट्ठे हुए हैं। यूथ की क्या समस्याएं हैं? यूथ क्या चाहता है? यूथ का क्या सपना है? हमारी दिल्ली का यूथ बड़ा टैलेंटेड है भाई साहब। 20 नए कॉलेज बनाए जाएंगे दिल्ली के अंदर। 20 नए कॉलेज बनाएंगे और जितने कॉलेज आज चल रहे हैं उन कॉलेजों के अंदर भी सीटें बढ़ाएंगे।
And for more national news, let's take you nationwide. New LPG cash subsidy scam starting today. LPG consumers in 11 states will start getting cash subsidy so that they can buy the cooking fuel at market price. The ambitious direct benefit transfer for LPG, or the DBTL scheme, which was launched by the previous UPA government in June 2013 but abruptly stopped earlier this year, has been modified to exclude the requirement of Aadhaar for availing cash subsidy. The Maharashtra government is mulling a proposal to link ration cards with Aadhaar numbers. The move is being planned with a view to ensure that the benefits provided by the government reach the beneficiaries and the process remains transparent. At present, the number of people below poverty line in Maharashtra is around 7 crore. The centre has agreed to raise compensation for Bhopal gas tragedy victims. The government has also promised to revise the number of deaths and injuries in the tragedy. The decision came following a hunger strike by 5 women who sat on a fast unto death on the 10th of November in Delhi. President Pranab Mukherjee today gave the official language awards to different ministries and departments for their initiatives for promoting Hindi at Raj Bhasha Samaroh in Delhi. President Pranab Mukherjee said that Hindi as a language plays a significant role in connecting the government and the people. On to some international news now. The intelligence wing of the Border Security Force is warning that China is trying to help Pakistan in intensifying tensions across the border. A BSF report says that the People's Liberation Army has been cited imported arms training to Pakistani troops across the border in Jammu and Kashmir. Here's a report.
A BSF intelligence report is setting off alarm bells in India. It says Chinese troops have been spotted training Pakistani army personnel in weapons handling opposite the Rajouri sector in Jammu and Kashmir.
These activities with regards to Chinese supports to the Pakistani troops and Pakistani agencies across the Jammu and Kashmir, which is illegally being occupied by Pakistan. The Foreign Ministry has already raised this issue before the Chinese authorities. India has already stated that the Chinese activities or support to the Pakistani people in that part of Jammu and Kashmir is unacceptable.
The BSF report also warns that Pakistani troops are taking over paramilitary posts from Pakistani Rangers opposite Sri Ganganagar sector. New observation towers have come up on the Pakistani side at Abohar and Gurudaspur sectors in Punjab.
The recent BSF intelligence report regarding Chinese troops in POK has to be studied very carefully. Chinese military presence in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir has a certain political and diplomatic signal. There is also a military dimension, but more than the military, I would be concerned about the kind of political and diplomatic signal that China is seeking to convey to India.
The External Affairs Ministry is, however, downplaying the BSF report.
The National Security Advisor is here to advise the Prime Minister. This morning, Prime Minister met President Xi Jinping. There was no such issue that the Prime Minister's attention was drawn to by the National Security Advisor.
The report also mentions that a large group of terrorists is planning to infiltrate Jammu and Kashmir, especially to disrupt the upcoming assembly elections in the state. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And amid simmering tensions at the border, there's good news from the health sector. An American research finding says a major milestone has been reached in the battle to eliminate polio globally. The US Center for Disease Control, or the CDC, says a second of the 3 forms of polio virus has been eliminated after a mass vaccination campaign. Wild polio virus type 3 has not been detected for more than 2 years now. Type 2 was eradicated in 1999. Experts said the world was closer than ever to defeating polio, but the situation in Pakistan was worrying. In Pakistan, the number of cases has gone up from 59 last year to 236 in 2014 after the Pakistani Taliban have stopped polio vaccination program in some tribal areas for about 2 years now. And more international stories in Global Buzz. An earthquake measuring 7.3 on the Richter scale under the sea in eastern Indonesia sparked a tsunami warning in the Asia-Pacific region. The tsunami alert was lifted hours later, but not before hundreds of residents to flee their homes on the coastlines. No casualties or damage have been reported. The Philae lander from the distant comet 67P has sent another stream of data back to Earth before losing power. The European Space Agency says Philae is pressed up against a cliff and under deep shadows. This means it cannot get enough light onto its solar panels to recharge its systems. The agency also says the lander delivered everything expected of it, just as its failing battery dropped it into standby mode. The body of a Roman Catholic priest from Uganda who went missing in southwestern Mexican state of Guerrero has been found in the mass grave in which bodies of 43 college students were allegedly found in late September. The priest was identified by the recovered skull as well as dental records. He had been missing since May and is believed to have been killed by a local gang after he refused to baptize the daughter of the gang leader. Fires that burned through thick bushland close to residential areas in the Blue Mountains west of Sydney have been brought under control. According to Australia's Rural Fire Service, dozens of residents were forced to leave their homes and a school was evacuated after the fire started near Warrimoo and Blaxland on Friday. However, cooler temperatures gave about 260 firefighters the chance to prevent it from spreading further. And in some sports news just coming in, Vishwanathan Anand has lost Game 6 to reigning chess champion Magnus Carlsen at the World Chess Championship at Sochi. Both players were tied at 2.5 points each before the game, but Carlsen, playing with the advantage of white, broke Anand's defense to take a 1-point lead in the 12th Game Championship. Carlsen will have the advantage of playing with the white pieces in Game 7 on Monday. The scores now are Carlsen 3.5 points to Anand's 2.5 points.
And the other option is to take on G5. And after Bishop...
And more sports news now in Sportsbeat. It was a great day for Indian shuttlers as both Saina Nehwal and Kidambi Srikanth stormed into the finals of the China Open Super Series in their respective singles category. Olympic bronze medalist Nehwal outclassed Liu Xin of China in just 46 minutes. Srikanth, on the other hand, won his match in a walkover after his German counterpart retired. He faces 5-time world champion Lin Dan in the finals. The ISL match between Northeast United and Pune City ended in a goalless draw. Northeast United dominated the attacks but failed to break Pune's defence. With 1 point each in the game, Pune are at 3rd place with 12 points, while Northeast United are 5th with 10 points. Australian Open winner Stan Wawrinka defeated Marin Cilic to step up a semi-final clash with compatriot Roger Federer at the ATP World Tour Finals. Wawrinka needed to win just 3 games to qualify for the semis. He eventually won the match 6-3, 4-6, 6-3. In the other semi-final, world number 1 Novak Djokovic will face Japan's Kei Nishikori. And finally, the countdown to Christmas is officially underway in France as Paris's Christmas market opened its doors to the public, turning the Champs-Élysées into a winter wonderland. Take a look. We'll come back and see you tomorrow, same time. Good night.